MLS is back. We hope. We're pretty sure. We'll find out shortly. But so long as it stays back, we're excited to announce that we'll be hosting a Waking the Red weekly show in partnership with our friends over at Footy Talks every Tuesday. We'll be doing a live Zoom show as well as across the interwebs to discuss all things MLS is back tournament, of course, with a distinctly Toronto FC focus. You can stay tuned for details on how you can follow along and engage with us live, ask us questions, that sort of thing. And we hope to have some guests as well on the show coming up, so stay tuned for that. But before we go any further here, I figured I would introduce my co-hosts on this show. First, starting out with the 2011 Chaos Kit, as he described it, Jeff Nesker. How you doing, Jeff?
Worst team in the world. I'm doing okay.
There you go. There's the we'll call Jeff the pessimist, and then we'll call Michael, who is the managing editor of Waking Red, the optimist, wearing his kit with a star on it. How are you doing, Michael?
Good, Mitch. How are you doing today?
Oh, not too bad. As I said, we'll try and stay somewhat positive throughout this show, of course, in light of the news of cases in Florida and FC Dallas as well. But we do have to start the show off, of course, on a bit of a negative with the news today that Funiachi Achara will be out for the rest of the regular season with an ACL injury. Jeff, I guess we'll just start with you on this. Your thoughts on, obviously, a bit of a downer going into the MLS is back week.
Yeah, it stinks. I mean, he was just getting started. We know that injuries have plagued his career up to this point. And that injury risk was always an issue with Achara. But it's a pretty morbid surprise to have this cross all of our inboxes this morning. Absolutely.
Michael, any follow-up thoughts? I know you talked with Greg Vanny about this as well recently and on the media call. What were his thoughts on the Achara injury?
Yeah, it's just, as Jeff sort of pointed out there, definitely devastating. Just the story that he had, coming into the season, he made his way onto the team, kind of turned a few heads there at TFC Live there. And, that debut against New York City FC, that was special. I mean, we're starting to see the beginning of something really, really, like I said, special. So to hear, wake up to the news this morning that he tore his ACL and is out for the season is obviously very devastating. And for Greg Vanny in particular, he thought that Achara might be a piece that he would use constantly this season. He said if he wasn't starting, then he'd probably be the first player off the bench, right? So, I mean, for him to lose that kind of asset heading into this tournament, it's a good thing TFC have a lot of depth, though. So let's leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the concern maybe is that Achara was potentially one of those players who could have filled in as at least a false nine role. He is kind of the profile of that player. Should Josie Altidore not be able to play consistently during this tournament or the season going forward. But Michael, I wanted to follow up with, that call in general. What were some of the things that stood out and what Greg had to say?
Yeah, aside from the Achara stuff, obviously, he was asked a lot about, the current situation with the MLS is back tournament, obviously with COVID-19 kind of making its way into that bubble. We learned that 6 FC Dallas players the other day tested positive within the bubble. And, today there's reports that a Columbus Crew player possibly tested positive within the bubble. So Greg Vanny showed a little bit of reservation when talking about, going down there into the bubble. He actually brought up the point where TFC are going to look into the fact of trying to stay in Toronto where it's more of a controlled environment as opposed to going down into the bubble. They're supposed to depart on Friday, July 2nd, into the bubble. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that.
Jeff, any follow-up thoughts on that and, what we heard from Greg today?
Well, I mean, the numbers are certainly a point of contention because they've sort of shortened. They keep shortening that 14-day quarantine period. So, with the Columbus news today, it can't actually be verified as to whether they caught it in the bubble or they brought it with them from Columbus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not good. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. It's not good news, and the pressure is certainly mounting with respect to whether this is a feasible idea or not. And those questions are starting to get asked. They've been asked for a while now, but the choir is starting to sing at a louder key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be the case with any of the sports returning over the next few weeks and months in North America. But with MLS and where it's being played, certainly, and the proximity we are to the start of the season, certainly those cries are going louder, as you said, Jeff. But let's end the show on a positive note, guys. Let's start with Michael. What are you looking forward to most when this MLS is back tournament?
Yeah, for sure.
Finally
From a
kicks off?
TFC perspective, Greg Vanney kind of touched on it again in his call today, but he's excited to see some of his young guys step up. At the MLS's back tournament, we're going to see 5 substitutions allowed as opposed to 3. Just friendly reminder that those 5 substitutions do have to take place within 3 occasions, so you can't use 5 different substitutions over the course of the matchup. You kind of have to double up on some of them if you are going to use those 5 subs. But getting back to my point there is that we're going to see a lot of these new young faces come up, and we're talking about Jaquil Marshall-Ruti, the youngest signing ever in Toronto FC history. We're talking about Jaden Nelson, who's 17 years old, and these are just some of the names that we'll see there make their debut at the MLS's back tournament. So I'm excited to see them.
Jeff, before we go to you, can you imagine the time killing capability you'd have if you could just make 5 separate subs? Like you get to the 89th minute, it's like every 30 seconds you're subbing on a new player. But at any rate, yeah, Jeff, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be so dark art. It would like need its own new classification. But yeah, I'm also looking forward to seeing this Franken season. I mean, right now, there's a decent amount of truth to the fact that maybe Vela won't be showing up because his wife is pregnant. So we're going to see some really interesting lineups from all the teams. And I've spoken about this at length in columns for WTR, but especially after watching so many dead rubber matches in the Big 5 Euro leagues over the course of the restart, I think MLS's greatest strength and perhaps it's also its greatest weakness is its parity. So we're going to see that on display, and hopefully it'll attract some new eyeballs to the league, because I do think that it's an interesting wrinkle of MLS. The salary cap allows for a certain parity that other leagues just simply don't have. So I am looking forward to that, absolutely. But right now I'm sort of on the seesaw between the wanting MLS to come back and the existential crisis of am I an asshole because I want them to come back so badly. So there we go with that.
Yeah, that's definitely. I think that's definitely a chief concern for all of us. I think we want this to happen, but we want it to happen in a way that everyone can stay safe. But in terms of excitement, I think building on what Michael said, I'm interested to see, and I'll write about this a little bit more for Waking the Red later on in the week. I'm excited to see Greg Vanney, the tournament manager, because it's distinctly different from everything he's done up to this point in his career as a regular season, even as a playoff manager. The fact that all of the group games count for regular season points, and then trying to get the Champions League spot as well. It's going to be a whole new unique set of challenges, and I think we'll get to see maybe another layer of Greg Vanney, the manager. So definitely looking forward to that. And of course, looking forward to talking to all of you when on Tuesday, July 7th, we do our MLS is Back preview show on Waking the Red Weekly. Until then, enjoy your Canada Day weekend, everyone.